Metagenics gets to the root of whole body health with pure, potent ingredients sourced from nature, clinically tested and trusted by doctors for decades. And unlike some other supplements, Metagenics is scientifically designed to be completely absorbed and start working in as little as 45 minutes, bringing your body back into balance for lasting well-being. Nourish your systems, don't just manage your symptoms, and unleash your inner power to heal. Metagenics, the science that creates balance.
Hello and welcome to the Made Fitz Show. I am your co-host, Dr. Lauren Fitz, and I have my beautiful co-host, Melissa McAllister. But we have two special guests today. We have her other half, Mick McAllister, and someone that you guys have probably never heard of, but you're going to thank me for introducing you to him, Learn Like a CPA, Ryan Bakke. Gentlemen, thank you for joining our podcast today. How are y'all doing?
Great.
Oh, I'm amazing. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. So let me go ahead and tell the listener what to expect from today's episode. So long story short, our last episode of the year, I talked about the fact that I have started to get into real estate as another form of income in my assets, right? And I know nothing about real estate, especially compared to what Mick and Melissa know about. They have 19 properties. They have been doing real estate as one of their sources of income for a while. And I was talking about the fact that I need to find a CPA that really knows how to find all of the tax benefits, because I just wrote a very large check to the IRS that I'm still a little bitter about. And I just feel like I need to find someone that can help guide me in this next journey, because I have a business, a brick and mortar business, but now I have real estate. And talking about that, one of our listeners, she said, hey, you got to check this guy out. Ryan Bakke, he is the CPA. He has this podcast that you can literally learn all of the things, which I never, for the record, thought that I would be listening to a podcast called Learn Like a CPA, just for the record. But here I am at almost 45, listening to your podcast, Learn Like a CPA. So we are here to talk about not things that we typically talk about on this podcast, but I do think that this is an episode that will bring a lot of value to the listeners, specifically the ones that have been thinking about possibly dabbling into real estate, but are too scared to go there. Yes?
Yeah.
Sure.
So
Well
Ryan, let me first start by asking you, what got you into, because you're a CPA, but most CPAs actually don't know much about real estate, right?
Mm-hmm.
What got you into focusing in this area?
Nobody in my family grew up business owner, entrepreneur, rental property owner. In fact, 93% of Americans will never own a business or a rental property.
Wow, that sucks.
And it's always 80-20, right? Because it's 2% of people that employ the other 98% of people in this world also. A lot of people don't talk about that. But my finance professor in college was really into real estate. And so I was always intrigued a little bit. And I'll never forget, I was working one of my first jobs as an accountant. I was 17 or 18. And I was preparing 2 tax returns that day. So I did a tax return for a married couple that made about $200,000 through their W-2. And then I did another tax return for a single guy who lived in Chicago, and he owned about 18 apartment buildings. Well, he made double their income. He made 400 grand in cash flow, and he was single, which meant he was in a higher tax bracket, yet he paid less in taxes. And I remember thinking to myself, like, man, did I do this wrong? Like, am I going to get fired? And my boss goes, no, it's because he invests in real estate. And I've been trying to figure out to this day, like, all the different ways that real estate investors, business owners and entrepreneurs can save money on taxes. But that's really what got it started for me, was that story, and understanding that if you're a multimillionaire, it's probably because you own a good chunk of real estate too.
Right. So then that goes to Mick. So Mick, I know your history because you used to sell cars, high-end cars. So you haven't always been into real estate. At what point did you decide, like, hey, we need to diversify our income? Like, I don't really know how long y'all been into real estate. I just know that y'all done it for a while. And I respect the fact that you were smart enough to realize this is a smart investment.
Yeah. It was an aha moment for me when we were living in Maui. And at that point in time, I was specifically like armpits deep in an exotic car dealership, right? We were doing the crazy ultra high ends, but then we were also an Audi branded dealer. And a good car deal, you know, you ask any car guy, a good car deal is like a $5,000 profit margin target. So you take an item and it takes just as much effort, just as much connection to make 5 grand. Or I would have some schleppy looking customer come walking in his flip flops, you know, and he's like, oh yeah, I just, you know, flipped this house, made $150,000. And I'm like, I'm such an idiot, man. Like selling an item and making a bigger profit margin is attractive. But then it's just like Ryan said, so there's such a small percentage of us that are just willing to jump in the fire. You know, it's that's the thing. That's the thing that holds everybody back is you just have to fall into it and trust the fact that you're going to swim. That's all I can say. We still don't understand any of it. And even when you said 19, it's like, wow, she made it sound like we really have our shit together, but we don't, you know, not at all, not at all. And then we defer to people like Ryan and a multitude of other, you can never have success in this world without help from other people. And it's people like Ryan that will keep us from getting in trouble.
You didn't answer the question though.
That's what I do.
Which is typical.
Yeah, that's what I do.
I mean, what got you? I mean, can you?
That's what it was.
Was it, what's his butt?
Yeah, it was probably a buddy of mine, Bart, right? Like he was just the most obnoxious person you've ever met in your life. And he made making money look so effortless. And it was attached to real estate. It was always attached to real estate. And I'm like, God, if this idiot can do it, I surely can. You know what I mean? I surely can. And
here we are.
Yeah, you know, I didn't start at his level of magnitude. He was buying commercial buildings out of California that were just roachy. Then he would go in and he'd just completely remodel them, and then he'd rent them all out, right, on leases. And that's called like a blue sky, right? He would then create the value off of, I have all these leases signed, so now it's worth multi-millions of dollars instead of 600 grand that he bought it for. And he would sell it, and he'd tell me the amount of money he'd make, and I'm like, why am I sitting in this stupid chair all day long, you know, general manager of a store, and just wasting my life, you know?
So it's kind of like the analogy that was Ryan was talking about right before we hit record, the getting dressed up for something to go nowhere, right?
Yeah. It's also, some people grow up with a background where they don't believe that they're entitled to the wealth and they're worth that. So you spent a lot of your life thinking that the most amount of money that you can make on any transaction was $5,000. You know, I tell this story all the time, but like, let's say you have a friend and they're like, I need $5,000 a month to live. Okay. There's certain people in this world who will figure out how to make $500 an hour and tell themselves, oh, great, I only need to work 10 hours a month.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I figure out how to make $500 an hour, and I'm like, how do I work 100 hours a week? Right?
Exactly.
So, but there's also this sense of like worth, because especially if you grow up like blue collar family, you know, middle income, you don't think that you could ever earn more than $100 an hour or $5,000 per transaction. It's like, I always use the analogy, you know, a flea, when you put a flea in a jar, it only jumps to the jar's height. Okay. Now, fleas can actually jump up to 36 inches. But guess what happens when you take the flea that's been in the jar and you take him out of the jar? He can only jump 4 inches, because he only believes that he can jump 4 inches because that's what he's done his entire time, his entire life. He doesn't know that he actually can jump, you know, 8 times as high.
That's
or
a
9
great
times as
analogy.
high.
I've never heard that before. I learned something.
I got another one for you too. There's also when they bring over elephants from Africa to like put them in the circus and stuff like that, they chain them up as a baby. And that elephant, because he's such a baby, he tries to break away from the shackle and he can't. He keeps trying to break away, can't. And then when he grows into a full-size elephant and they put a shackle on him, the elephant can actually break the shackle completely if he wanted to go berserk. But his mind tells him that he's been shackled the entire time and he can't break the chain. And that's how they keep elephants like in circuses, even though that the elephants can break the chain if they wanted to.
100%. We've been to Africa and we'll watch them just slowly wrap their trunk around a tree. I'm talking like a 2 or 3 foot diameter tree, and with no effort whatsoever, just like barely swing their trunk and it just rips the entire roots out. I mean, it's crazy how much power they have. The ones that don't know any better.
There's a lot of people that have a greater power than they think, and they're more qualified to do what they want to do. You're the most qualified to help the person you used to be, right? So
Right.
if you were once fat and out of shape, you can help somebody that's fat and out of shape. You know, if you were once poor and you're now rich or wealthy, you can help somebody. You know, that's why the first step of Alcoholics Anonymous is you got to find a mentor. You got to find somebody that's already been through the program to show you how. So
Exactly. And that's why we have you guys on, because I mean, selfishly, I want y'all to teach me how to be like you. And so, okay, so we have someone maybe like me who's just bought their first rental property, or maybe someone that was like me last year that was just, I mean, I was looking at so many different Instagrams, podcasts about all of the things real estate. So that person that's either just about to take the jump and it's kind of scared, or the person like me that just took the jump and I'm still scared of shit because I don't know what I'm doing. Let's talk to the first person that I was last year. Well, what kind of advice do both of you have for that person?
go ahead. Go ahead.
Me? Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Is that person that's trying to save the money or trying to come up with that down payment, you have to be okay with getting rid of. Ryan said it best. If you're dressed up, it doesn't matter if you have nowhere to go. And this is how like 99% of the US specifically lives. It's to impress the Joneses or to keep up with the Joneses, right? So I got to drive a Mercedes or a BMW. Though I want to be an investor, an entrepreneur, right? Or own real estate, well, maybe you need to sell it and drive a $5,000 Toyota for a couple of years, because you could take that $30,000 equity, hopefully, that you have in your BMW, and there's your first down payment. So the hesitation, just because we want it all yesterday, you have to be able to give up that just for a short period of time to, like Ryan says, to get the 36 inches instead of the 4 inches. Everybody wants to live in the 4 inches because it's a flash in a pan, right? We have to have everything instantly. I mean, look at our society with the phones and stuff. And, it's just like, God, there's no attention span anymore. We got to get back to having just a wee little bit of patience. So maybe we don't have to work until we're 70 years old.
Amen. Okay, Ryan,
Yeah.
what do you have to say?
So a lot of times when people have fear, it's more of a experience problem. They don't have the necessary experience to think that they can. 90% of the people in this world will never believe in themselves, unfortunately. One way to make it easier is you have to know the numbers in and out. So you have to know, okay, if I can buy a property for this price and rent it for this amount, as long as I can keep my expenses to XYZ, it'll make money. And it's funny, Dave Ramsey, if you've ever followed Dave Ramsey stuff, he says that math works in all 50 states. So I remember this too. I used to deliver pizza for Lou Malnati's, which is a popular pizza place around here.
Illinois. Yep.
If you're a New Yorker, I'm sorry, we have way better pizza than you, by the way.
Those are fighting words.
This guy was the head cook at Lou Malnati's for 17 years, and I was delivering pizzas. I was folding boxes in the back, and I asked him this question. I'm like, what goes into making a really good pizza? Is it the sauce? Is it the bread? Is it the temperature that it's cooked at? What is it? Is it the toppings? He goes, Ryan, you could be the best chef in the world, but if you have rotten ingredients, it ain't gonna work out. But the best chef in the world also knows how to spot out rotten ingredients. And I think about that a lot in real estate, because if you have the framework of like, I know what this deal needs to come out to in order for it to be profitable, then you're fine. The numbers make sense. It's the people that don't have the experience of the numbers, or they're not a chef to be able to spot out the rotten ingredients. But if you can develop a framework for understanding and analyzing properties, that makes jumping in a lot easier, in my opinion.
So what you're saying is me just jumping in kind of blindfolded was probably not the smartest thing.
So there's a couple of books written about this. One of them is called The Gift of Fear. Have you ever heard of that book?
Yeah, that's actually a good book.
But then there's also like, sometimes people's success comes from just knowing that, or not knowing that they shouldn't have been doing that. I have one of my mentors, he was flipping 5 or 6 homes a month when he was 23, 24 years old. And he's like, yeah, nobody ever told me that I shouldn't probably be doing that if I'm only 23, Just like I started my CPA firm when I was 23, nobody told me that I probably shouldn't do that. So I didn't that like fear part of my brain never like triggered me to respond and take a step back. I never, which could be to your downside or, upside or your detriment, but like that fear receptor, I just didn't have that. So I just went head first in it, just like you.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of, I feel like Mick and Melissa, y'all kind of done that on a lot of things. Is that safe to say? Because I know I have in a lot of areas of my life.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, with us, he's very gifted. He, as a young boy, he had to work really hard for anything he wanted. So he's more determined than any man I've ever met. And so he knows how. What were you, 8 years old when you bought your first flip?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Little
so,
dirt bike.
yeah. So, I mean, he's just, since a little boy, has learned to look at something and be like, I can make this desirable.
Huh.
So he did that with dirt bikes. He did that with cars. He's doing that now with real estate. So I think there's probably a great formula that people like Ryan teach. And Mick hasn't read a book in his life. He hasn't really had a mentor. He truly just has a gift at looking at something. He makes the joke, there's an ass for every seat, that, he believes that if he buys something, there's somebody out there that will want what he has because he's just got this touch. So I feel like he is a little bit different. All that to say that I wanted to say is that we've made mistakes and we've learned about our mistakes along the way, but I'm toot his horn and he's going to be mad at me, but he rarely makes a mistake. When he buys something, he'll always get his money back, if not make a profit. And he gets better at it, which is great as the years go by, but he's just always been really good at it. I think some people just naturally have that gift of seeing something and going, I can make this work. So maybe you have that gift too, Lauren.
Well, that's sweet, but I'll totally argue opposite of that. And it's nice that I guess I've glazed her so well. I mean, wow, that was impressive to hear, because I'm a rolling shit show. And I think we all are. And like Ryan said, we all have the chance. We all have the chance to just jump in the boiling water. And the funny thing about it is you're not going to burn. It's kind of like getting in this is a perfect analogy. It's like getting in a hot tub. Oh, when you get in it, how long does it take? 3 seconds, 5 seconds, and you're like, this is amazing, right? But when you first jump in it, you're almost like borderline, I'm out.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it's just like you actually did your due diligence enough, Lauren, and you're going to be fine because you checked your surroundings, right? 2 or 3 miles. What are things renting for? And if I buy this property, and what it's going to take to, visually make it aesthetically better and attract for people to come into it. So there's my cost, right? That I'm going to dump into it. And then you have to look at, okay, so my ROI is based off of how much money do I need to put down? So like, let's say the average rent in that area is $2,500, but your mortgage was going to be $2,700. Well, then you're going to have to put down 50 grand or 100. You know what I mean? You have to offset it to where you always have an upswing margin. And as long as you do, sure, it might not be the best decision you've ever made, but it's a great place to start. And the beauty of it is, like Ryan says, once you have like one property, now it just opens like a portfolio of avenue to take money from another popular business that you have that's doing great and take that profit, move it somewhere else, move it somewhere else, move it somewhere else. So like you said, at the end of the year, it's like, well, how come Lauren makes 400 grand and only pays 14% in tax, and everybody thinks you're getting away with like some kind of miracle. Well, they don't understand your level of diversity. Diversity saved your ass. I had a friend, we actually both got audited for, this is a whole nother story, for 2020 and 2021. And let me just preface and say it had nothing to do with our investors. It just had to do with a schlep that we decided to bring on as a CPA, and he was super crooked, right? And so anyways, when that happened, his family didn't have any real estate. Our family had, at the time, 21 properties. He paid, when he got audited, $306,000. We paid $16,000. But we both got accused for the same amount of money lost. That's how huge the variation can be. It saved our ass.
So Ryan, what kind of advice do you have for someone like me who literally is in the first first property, because I'm already thinking about the second property, but what I know, right? What are some of the most important things for me to do at this stage, knowing, and maybe this is a little bit, unique because I do have a brick and mortar business and I do pay myself a W-2 for my salary. So I have income, I will have income with real estate and W-2 in the next year. So what are the biggest things that I need to watch for in this first year before I buy my second property and third property?
Yeah, the biggest thing that prevents real estate investors from scaling, in my experience, after coaching over 500 real estate investors to this day, is going to be your debt to income.
Okay.
So, the amount of money that Fannie or Freddie conventional loan will let you borrow is going to be capped at whatever your annual income is. Now, generally speaking, it's normally about 5x of whatever your annual income is. So, let's say you make 200,000 as a W-2. Well, there's some bank out there that will most likely let you borrow up to $1 million total between like your primary and your rental. Doesn't mean you should do it.
Okay.
But there's
No,
a bank
yes.
out there that will.
They both were like shaking their heads.
I
when
know.
would do that.
Well, my first house, I was making 62 grand a year. They told me I could borrow $400,000. I was like, you're out of your damn mind. That's like 7x my W-2 salary. But I say protect your debt to income because a lot of investors, when they buy that first or second property, they leverage themselves way too much, and then they're stuck. And then they have to wait for either their W-2 to go up, their business to go up, or those properties to be profitable for a couple of years before they can add on their income to then qualify for more loans. So I use the analogy a lot too, where I love shooting pool at bars, right? So I go out with my friends, they're drinking, I'm drinking, but I like to shoot pool because I'm skilled at it, and my dad taught me how to shoot pool. And but the biggest lesson I learned about pool, I take forever to shoot, and my friends are like, "Why? That's the easy shot. Just shoot that ball on that hole." And I go, "Look, I'm not worried about this shot right here. I'm worried about where my cue ball is going to end up for
Amen.
the next shot. That's what I'm worried about the most. Now I want to focus on the shot at hand, but not a lot of investors are worried about where they're going to end up after that first deal. So, if it's like, let's say it's a pretty big, extensive project where you have the down payment in, but then you have to put a lot of money in. Well, like what happens if interest rates shoot up in between that time, and then now that the property's finished, you're trying to pull your money out. Oop, my microphone. You're trying to pull your money out of it, but you can't because the interest rates shot up and you wouldn't cash flow, right? So like where you end up at after that first deal, you got to start thinking about how do I set myself up for success in the future. That's my biggest takeaway.
So should someone like me work with someone like you from jump?
So now I have various like levels of service and how we can help people. So anything from a free, I have my podcast, my Facebook group's got over 12,000 people in it. To we have, lower price. I do workshops and online events. I'm actually doing my first in-person one at the end of April. You should
Oh,
go to it. Yeah, it's in
I'll
Chicago.
come. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have like those lower ticket, like lower tier, just kind of get people started. But I think if you're a business owner and you're a real estate investor too, you should be working with a CPA, no doubt. No
But
doubt.
not just any CPA, because like when I first talked to you, I was like, I feel like, and I'm not throwing shade on my CPAs because they actually saved my ass in the last 2 years. When I had someone that was horrendous that messed up my books for the first 2 years. So they're great, but I don't think that they specialize in real estate. And that's where I was like telling Melissa, I feel like I need someone that is specific for real estate. Because is that true? Are all CPA, are they, do they know the real estate law? I mean, I feel like you should know tax law no matter what, but I
mean,
feel like mine don't.
Nowadays, it's very similar to like doctors. So you could have like a general health doctor, a doctor for
Okay.
kids, or you go into the surgeon realm and it's like, well, there's a hand surgeon, a foot surgeon, an eye surgeon,
Okay.
a nose plastic surgeon. So that's, to me, that's what a real estate CPA is. So if you've been a W-2 your whole life or a business owner, and then you're now starting to buy real estate and a lot of it, well, it's going to be helpful to have a real estate CPA do your tax return.
Mick, Melissa, do you guys have a real estate specific CPA, or how do y'all?
Yes. Yes. Especially after the mess. And I didn't mean to just use generic CPA. Ryan can probably giggle to this just like I do. I've been a used car salesman most of my life, right? And it's like, oh God, used car salesman, right? So it's the same thing. Like, I mean, there's good and bad in everything. So,
Right.
yes, do your due diligence and find someone that really gets you. More importantly, like the guy I have now, I told him right off the get. Well, I actually used him before when we were at a completely different level. Then we went away to this other guy. It just turned into a nightmare. And then I went back to him and I said, "Hey, can I come back to you? But I'm not the guy that I was. Now I'm the guy that I'm hoping I can become. And we've got a lot more going on." And he goes, "Good, I've grown too." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." So we glued back together and we're still, you know what I mean? We're still firing on all cylinders together. So, and more importantly, it's, you got to find somebody you can trust, because this is real life, and it can be taken from you literally like it did. It can be taken from you hell of a lot faster than it took to make it. So a
Yeah.
little bit of caution for sure. Don't be
Yeah.
scared, but have some caution.
See, that's the thing. I have trust issues. Let's be real. I'm very aware of it.
We all do.
Because the accounting, and she wasn't even a CPA, but the accounting person that I trusted in my initial few years of this business was referred to by someone that I trusted. And I'm not sure if he knew how incompetent she was, but literally I was at a point after the first 2 years that I thought I was going to have to file bankruptcy. And thank you, Jesus, I didn't have to. And thank you to my dad, who came in and basically took over as CFO and whatnot. But I have trust issues. And so now I'm like, I need to really date around before I find the CPA that's right for me. So Ryan, help me out. I mean, if I wanted to work with someone like you and your team, would y'all work alongside with my existing accountants, or is that even a thing? Because I don't think my existing accountants do real estate or are in the know, but they're good at what they do. So what does that look like for someone like me that is, I have a W-2, I have a small business, but now I'm getting into real estate?
Yeah, a lot of people say that actually. So if you might have a specialist CPA for your business. So a lot of like doctors, dentists, people in construction, they will have a CPA for their business. But where I guess the magic happens, quote unquote, is on your personal return. Because on
Okay.
your personal return, that's where everything gets hashed out. That's where like your business income meets your rental income, and if you work with somebody that's good, they should offset each other if you follow the
Right.
right strategy. So to me, we encourage people to, maintain the relationship that they have with their, especially like a business CPA. Like they can do, your books and they can file that business tax return, but leave it to us to do your personal tax return and then the real estate that's on it. Because that's really where the magic happens in my opinion. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to
Mhm.
go back to Mick real fast. I'm just curious. Y'all had a good guy and you left him for someone that was terrible. Why did you leave the original CPA and then now you're back? Because he obviously was doing good for you because you wanted to go back to him.
Yeah. Well, like I was touching base on, we just jumped in. I mean, in 6, 7 months, I think we bought 7 or 8 properties. Like, I couldn't even believe they all got approved. I was using different banks, and I couldn't believe they all went at once. And I was like, "Bleh." But then, so the guy I was with, I just felt like we were running at a speed that we were running away. And at the same time, this other guy, saw the opportunity and, oh, I'm going to go to the new dumb people, that
Well,
are,
you
that are making
Yeah.
good money.
someone you
And yeah,
trusted.
and I was okay, and I was getting there. Like Lauren said, I was referred to someone by a buddy that I just adored,
Yeah.
and kind of a mentor, because he was 2 or 3 years ahead of me, right? He
Okay.
already had a couple of investment properties, so I just kind of leaned into that and did not do my due diligence, because if I just would have Googled enough and dug a little bit, I mean, there was a string of shit on this guy already. So just use the internet. It's a powerful, wonderful tool. Use the
Yes.
internet. And this is coming from a guy that hates social and doesn't even want to open a computer. But you got to go check, do your due diligence on things, people. And listening to our podcast, I'm like 50-50. and I'm thinking of the listeners, and I don't want anybody to be scared, right? Like right now, the whole world is just, it seems like it's out to get you, like the scams and stuff. But it shouldn't hold you back. It should actually put a bigger fire under your ass to separate, level up and separate, break away from the norm and start, just thinking about you and your family and making something more solid. Because you're right, it's so hard to trust right now. And if you're just in that big group of the 99%, I mean, it's just not a good quality of life.
Well, ownership, I mean, being your own boss, like once you get a taste of it, there's no going back. And I can't believe, Ryan, the numbers that you threw out. Like I didn't realize it was that bad. That's
Oh
scary.
yeah. You said something in there that I wanted to point out about being one or two steps ahead. Have you guys ever seen Catch Me If You Can by Leonardo
Yes,
or
that's
yeah.
Yes.
awesome
So,
movie.
it's based on a true story about a guy that faked being like a pilot, doctor,
Yep.
lawyer, everything, right? And then the movie, when Tom Hanks, he's the FBI agent, he catches him. He goes, "Man, out of all the things you've done," he's like, "You faked being a doctor, a lawyer, a pilot, a this, a that." He goes, "How did you teach an entire semester at BYU?" And in the movie, he's like, "I didn't need to know the entire semester. I just had to be one chapter ahead of the students." So I would read the
That's
chapter the
great.
night before, and then I would teach the students the next day. And then that taught me, I'm like, man, the person that I need to find needs to be one or two steps ahead of me, one or two chapters ahead of
So
me.
true.
Now, they can be, so here's the perfect mentor. Because if if your mentor's here and you're here, there's going to be a disconnect. The perfect mentor and the right coach is willing to meet you where you're at and just be one or two steps ahead of you. Right? So that's how
So
you
true.
identify like the people in your life that are going to help you get to the next level. Are those people that are willing to be one or two steps ahead of you? Because if they're way too high, there's going to be a disconnect. You're not going to understand it. It's going to be like
Yep.
speaking French to somebody, but they
Right.
have to be just one or two steps ahead.
And the reason why I thought that this would be appropriate for the Made Fits show is because we are all about giving people the tools so that they can basically own their life, be the healthiest, happiest version of themselves. And let's be real, if you don't have financial freedom, that is a struggle. And I think financial freedom is right around the corner. It's right over that fear, that false evidence appealing or appearing real, right? But so many people don't take that jump of blind faith that, all right, this is it. But I mean, I finally, after sitting on the sidelines and watching other people like Mick and Melissa just do the real estate thing, I realized like I want to diversify and I want to just blindly jump. And, it wasn't total blind because when I told Mick and Melissa that I bought a 4 unit, he was like, good girl. Yeah, that was a smart decision versus just buying, a single home or a double or whatever. Like I knew I'd done enough research that I was like, I know I want to get multi-units. And so I bought a fourplex and here I am kind of nervous about going into the next step. But I also, I know how important it is to get everything right so that this becomes a very smart financial decision. And having someone like you in my life, I think would be very helpful. Just saying. So if someone like me, because you actually don't do accounting anymore, you do coaching, is that correct?
So we have a service-based business. So we do
Okay.
tax filing, bookkeeping, advisory
Okay.
services. Like I said, I do a lot of like public speaking and podcasting. So I really focus a lot of my attention on those, like getting the word out in those efforts. But we have a team of 15 or 16 people that CPAs, bookkeepers, everybody that's on my team to help do the day-to-day work.
And we realize that you and I are not too far from each other. You're in Illinois as well, but I imagine that your team of 15, 16 helps people outside of Illinois.
Yeah, we all 50 states except Hawaii for some reason they don't let non-Hawaii CPAs practice in Hawaii, interestingly enough. So
Interesting.
yeah, and
Oh
it's
boy.
really bad because then it limits the talent to whoever's on the island. Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
anyway, but yeah, we have people in all 50 states but the trick or the key is they have to own real estate for us to work with them. We don't take anybody unless they own rental properties. It's kind of one of our, I don't want to say one of our core beliefs, but that's just what we're the best at.
Okay. So
Mm.
if I wanted to work with you last year to get prepared for this, I couldn't because I didn't own rental property yet. So in that time before a person's deciding to buy a rental property, what are some of the best things that I'd like to hear both of you advice to get done before you end up working with a real estate specialist like you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things is like identifying your buy box of what you're looking at. Because if you identify a buy box, you're telling the world exactly what you're looking for and also what you're not looking for at the same time. So if you're saying, look, I'm looking for 4 unit properties, a purchase price less than 600K or 500K, whatever it is, and then you're excluding everything else. And I think that's important because a lot of people get distracted. Because
Right.
the thing is, it takes the same amount of effort to close a duplex than it does a 4 unit. There's
Right.
a little bit more due diligence, but it's not that much time. Just like the $5,000 sale versus $100,000 profit off of one transaction or relationship, right?
Right.
So identifying your buy box is important, and then also to me, you want to really monitor your debt to income. You know, what's your credit score, and how bankable do you look to in the eyes of like lenders, right? So a lot of people who are self-employed, especially under that 100K mark, what do they want to do? They don't want to report anything. They want to
Right.
just collect all the cash and not pay taxes. You know, I had a buddy who was a mechanic, W-2 for a little bit, but then he started making 80, 90, $100,000 on the side in cash, and he wanted to go buy a house. Well, like, good luck, man, because you don't
Yeah.
have any, tax returns filed. So sometimes you actually have to pay tax as a self-employed person and take a step back in order to propel forward and actually qualify for loans with these banks.
So Mick, what about you?
That's a great point that Ryan had right there at the end, is that we all, when we start making a little bit more money, the first thing we want to do is pay less, keep more, keep more. And okay, that's great if you're going to be set and sedentary for the next, 3 to 5. But if you think you're going to maybe buy a second home, a vacation home, or a real estate investment property somewhere, and start dabbling with that, then you got to have the right CPA, because that guy should know enough to tell you, don't burn your debt to income ratio. And that can be on what you owe versus what you make, but then also what you allow the government to take or don't, right? Because if you make it look like on paper, I don't make any money, so I don't, keep my taxes as low as possible and take those deductions right here, it's really going to cap you, for growth. And experience that with a couple of buddies too in the previous big business that we were involved with. They were taking it too much up front, and then it totally stunted them for additional growth. And then also too, I think, and Ryan might, this is a little bit off subject, but kind of maybe the next transition is like where Lauren is right now. Say it's your first investment and you don't know anything. And even in multiple investments, it's still funny how you always feel like every successful person out there will always tell you, I feel like I don't know anything. And then even when you get to millionaires, I mean, most of the millionaires that you meet, or the guy that was my mentor from the get-go, Bart, the guy was legitimately illiterate. He was the most outrageous person and had the best personality ever. He could not fill out an application by himself. He would have to have an assistant do it and tell her the stuff. So it's all about action. Just be a person of action. Have a little bit of blind faith and just expect, feel like you should expect to be more. You know what I mean? Don't be stunted. But where you are with your investment too, and Ryan, wouldn't you agree? I think a lot of people just get a premature bad taste in their mouth. So like, let's say you start with your fourplex, right? And maybe you spend a little bit more than budget, right? Which is totally normal, especially on the
Yes.
first few, right?
Yep.
And then you go to rent it and you're like, well, God, all of this, and I'm only making $150 like net a month. This sucks. This is so stupid, And then they freak. And then they're like, I'm getting off of it. I'm getting off of it. I'm going to sell it. They don't know what the market's doing. I got to sell. I got to sell. I got to sell. Well, maybe like Ryan said, maybe the interest rates weren't good. Maybe the market's not strong, but because you're freaking, you just want to fold, right?
Right.
Don't be afraid to change your projection in your mind.
Okay.
If you're buying to rent, maybe when you get it all done and the market's good, maybe you sell it. And you make 400 grand, 500 grand. It wasn't the plan, but
Right.
If it's real and right now, then maybe I'm a seller, not a renter. And you
Right.
buy another one and then you rent it. And same thing with us. We found ourselves in a situation where we needed cash and we had some renters and they were doing great, but their leases were up in like, a month or two. And we're like, hey guys, we're going to list the things for sale. And I mean, 4 of them sold all in 1 month. And
Wow.
that wasn't the plan, but then we took that money and we bought that Cabo house. I mean, so it's like, don't be afraid to, in other words, just don't fight yourself. Just because you have that vision, I want to go
Yep.
this direction, you got to be okay to exit
Don't
too.
live in a tunnel.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So question for all of you. Is it better to start with short-term rentals or long-term rental properties?
Mm.
I'll let Ryan.
I think it's easier to start with long-term rentals inside of your own backyard, like that you
Cool.
can go to drive to.
I
God,
won.
took the words out of my mouth. I'm like,
Yeah, just
I want to drive by everything I own all the time.
yeah,
Okay.
just to like get a feel for it and see if it's something that you actually enjoy doing also.
Cool.
But eventually, my first long-term rental, I think I was making $350, $400 a door, which wasn't
Okay.
actually bad for a duplex per unit. But my first short-term rental, I made like $1,800 profit in the first month on like
Wow.
the same price house. So I would echo that statement of the problem with real estate, like following gurus and coaches, is they want to
Yes.
like put you through their own track or their own way. Like, never sell, never sell. But you have to know, like, okay, I've improved the value of this property so much, and because of where rates are at, I'm only making X, but there's however much equity in the property. Like, I need to offload this. I call it a cash on equity audit. So you look at your net equity of the property and compare it to the net cash flow every year. And if that number is too high, then you sell it and you get rid of it and you buy something else that will have a shorter break even on your money. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go back and write this down and take notes.
Yeah. So like and it all depends on your goals, right? So if somebody's like closer to retirement age, they don't really want to be as debt seeking or like as
Right.
risky, then maybe they don't. But I was working with a lady like late 30s. She wanted financial freedom. She didn't want to wait till she's 59 and a half to retire. And she
Right.
had 400,000 of equity in a property in Arizona. And it was only making like $8,000 a year net. So if you do 400K divided by 8, like she would have to rent the property out for 50 years, is it?
Oh,
If you do
geez.
400,000 divided by 8, she would have had to rent the property out for 50 years in order to make back what she could sell it for and walk away with, right?
That
So
makes sense. Okay.
if you do
That
if you
makes
do
sense.
100 divided by 50, she's only earning a 2% cash on equity return. You could earn more in a T bond than 2%.
Right.
So it's just like the chef analogy. Like you have to know, okay, man, I actually should flip this. I should hold on to it. I should rent it, hold on to it. I should sell it, buy something else. Like you just have to know. It's like having a toolkit. Like, if you using a screwdriver when you needed a hammer, probably not
Right.
going to be too good for you. So you have to know which one to use. Like, because that's the mistake that I made was, oh, I'm just a buy and hold guy. I'm gonna hold on to them forever. You have to know
Right.
when to get rid of them. Yeah.
That's really good advice. So I
Mm.
know that we have to wrap this up because you have a scheduled meeting coming up shortly. But before we wrap up, I want to know, because both of you were talking about, gurus online and whatnot. If you had to choose top 3 or 5 people that you think are giving sound advice, obviously I want them to follow Learn Like a CPA. I mean, I told you I started at your first podcast in 2022, and I'm just literally going through them. And I feel like I'd never heard of a cost segregation study or whatnot. Like I'd never heard of that. And now I'm like, okay, I'm hearing more and more. So your podcast is like gold. But what are some other gurus that you guys think? And maybe, I don't know, Mick, you might not know any since you're not on social media. But I know Ryan is on social media. What are some good gurus to follow for the person that's thinking about diversifying and getting into real estate?
Yeah, if you're looking to do, I would say on the short-term rental side, Bill Faith, his name is. I think it's just
Okay.
bfaith73 is his Instagram handle. Or there's
Okay.
a woman named Avery Carl. She's also really good for short-term rentals.
Okay.
For long-term rentals, there's actually a really good account. It's called the Fi Couple. It's a husband and wife duo team that talk a lot about real estate, specifically long-term rentals and multifamily. They started
Okay.
from like house hacking. I think they house hacked their first 2 or 3 properties while they were married and had kids, and then now the 4 properties that they had are paying for their, family home. So
Cool.
I think those are good people to follow. The people that dream is still attainable. Like
Yeah.
Yes.
they're not so too big to where it's like, oh, it's easy for you to say that you turned 15 million into 60 million, but like, how did you come up with the 15 million in the first place? I saw a Grant Cardone post a couple of weeks ago. He's like, yeah, I made $45 million. It's like, whoa, great. You needed 15 million to start. It's not attainable like to the average person.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
these people that I
I
just
stopped
mentioned,
following him because it was just
yeah,
like he's too big. Like I need someone that's closer to where I'm at.
yeah,
Like you said, a chapter ahead.
yeah, one chapter ahead.
Great advice.
Yeah.
Mick and Melissa, any last thoughts or words about real estate and financial freedom?
Just being when you asked us to do this, I looked at Mick and I said, and I've done that a couple times and I've giggled to myself. Ryan's talking or Mick's talking, and I'm sitting here smiling and nodding, going, I have no idea what they're saying. So when you're like, I'm like, why am I even on this podcast? And Mick said some kind words about you gotta make money to make more money, and I've been there, to help get us started.
I've taken all of
Yeah.
that was my job.
She knows how to make money. Let's be real.
Yeah. And then don't F it up.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's hard work. It really is. But just like anything that takes a lot of trust, that takes, you working a little bit harder, you maybe not driving as nice of a car like Mick said in the beginning. But in the end, it's absolutely worth it. I mean, it's creating such a beautiful lifestyle for us in so many different ways, personal ways and financial legacy ways that I'm so grateful that I'm sure he had his reason, but to jump from, I'm staring at a GT40 right now, from these nice cars, but going into real estate, what a profound difference that made in our life. And I'm just so grateful for that. So, and I hope eventually our kids, follow in his footsteps and do the same thing.
Real estate's just such a bigger hit, and it's so much more recognized than, for tax purposes. It's allowed to be put in the mix more than cars were. So like, I could write off, some parts and some service bills and things like that maybe, but if you get over $30,000 or $40,000 a year, it's going to be like a huge red flag. But with real estate, like Ryan said, I mean, what are you allowed before, eyes start twitching? It's 5 or 7x your income. I mean, that's a huge, and then hopefully you're growing your personal income the same time. So you're never reaching that ceiling. That ceiling is going to grow with. In other words, if you're, 4 or 5x, obviously at 400, then you go to 800, your ceiling just pops up with you. So that was a huge eye opener for me. And I am complete ignorance on fire. My friends always refer to me as the caveman in the dark because I'm not on social media. I will not watch news. I will not watch live stream TV. I don't want to see a commercial. I don't want to hear about who blew up in the subway. Or if I knew everything that was going on, I wouldn't make a single move. I would be in shell shock. I'd be like, oh my God, the whole world's burning down and it's not time to invest and I shouldn't buy that thing. I literally, one of our properties, I literally bought like right after that huge, or actually no, those 7 properties that we bought, it was like 3 months before COVID hit. And everybody's like, shit, dude, what are you going to do? And I'm like, what I planned on doing, I guess, I hope it worked. But, I am hopefully the advocate for the typical person that's listening to this. I didn't know anything about real estate, and I still feel like I don't, but I'm thankful and I'm blessed that it's working. But I just took the least amount of money I could. So I gave myself a budget of like $20,000 or $25,000 for down payments, which doesn't buy you a whole lot. But there are tons of houses out there that are 200 grand. And so I started looking using the internet for what I needed to do, and I found hotspots. Like, where do people like to hang out? What are cute little towns or areas that are eclectic? Maybe they're not in a buzz, maybe they're not in a big growth period, but where are people, hanging out and going to dinner? Oh, they really like this little area called historic downtown McKinney. Well, there were tons of houses around there that were 1 mile or less from the city square that were built in the 60s and 70s, and they were horrific looking. And at the same time, I'm watching these brand new multi-level apartments go up, and these, old Victorian homes that were huge square footage that were like $2 million when people would renovate them. And I'm going, there is so much delta here. I'll take the little tiny houses for 200 grand. I'll buy them with $25,000 down. I'll put a limit of 20 or 25 grand into them to, like they say, lipstick on a pig. And then they were all worth $395. So if you've got a dozen of them, that worked out really well, So, and I never felt leveraged or risked beyond. And my little fun takeaway as being a new investor into real estate, and I think Lauren, you said that back to me. When you're looking at it from the street, you have to ask yourself, if your whole world falls apart, would you live in that thing? Because if the answer is no, you're buying the wrong house. You don't trust yourself enough in that thing, right? I'm not saying you have to be proud of it or whatever, but would you live in it? Because if you don't believe that direction enough, it's going to be hard for you to sell it to the person you're renting or listing. You know what I mean? So always bare minimum, man, if the rest of my world fell apart, could I sell my primary home and live in this thing in my investment?
Right.
Then you're okay,
Great advice. And Ryan, last bits of advice for our listeners before we wrap this up.
Don't wait to invest and wait.
Yeah.
Also
like
too,
that.
I feel like life is just this. Do you remember playing the whisper in your ear game where, there's 10 people and like this person had to relay a message to the other person?
Yep.
And by the time I got to the last person, like it was way different than or non-existent at all, right?
Yep.
One person was like super, super quiet and couldn't hear. I feel like that's what happens with financial literacy. So nobody grows up like, oh yeah, my mom and dad instilled in me financial principles or like wisdom or like, here's what you should do with your money and not do with your money, So all we're doing is playing this little whispering game between generation to generation. And we need to be the voice that's going to change our family tree so that nobody after us, will have to live the way that we had to live, right?
That's great advice.
That's our number one drive for sure. And I'm sure Lauren's the same way. And I think with most entrepreneurs, they grew up in a really rough setting and they're like, hell no, no more for me. And definitely not for my kids. There's no way.
Definitely. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time to record this episode. I do know that a lot of listeners will find it very valuable. Ryan, I'm really excited that we crossed paths. I look forward to working with you for real. I'm excited about my future. Mick and Melissa, specifically Mick, I'm probably going to be texting you a little bit more for help over this next first year of being a property owner. But let everyone know, is it Learn Like a CPA on all platforms where they can find you, Ryan?
Yeah, I think by the time this comes out, I'm actually switching it. So it'll just be my first name, last name, CPA. Yeah.
Okay. Spell your last name, though. Or spell your name for you.
Yeah, it'll just be Ryan Bakke CPA. So Bakke is my last name.
Perfect. Okay. Ryan Bakke CPA. Thank you so much. Thank you guys. I appreciate y'all. And you guys, if this was helpful to you, make sure you share it to someone that you love. We thank you for your time. Melissa, you want to wrap us up with your saying? Because I still don't have a saying.
I was thought about changing mine, but I'm too lazy. So as always, you guys, we hope that you wake up feeling prepared and go to bed feeling proud. Have a great day.
Amen. Awesome. Thank you.